Here's the thing. If you had told me a year ago, even 6 months ago, that I would be spending the majority of my free time casually studying and researching mythological feminine archetypes and deities for the purpose of not only utilizing their lessons and teachings for my own life, becoming more of the bad bitch that I am, but sharing it with you, my friends, because this information, the teachings of goddesses, this shit is too good. This shit is too good to gatekeep. Because I fear that we have been entirely undersold on the concept of love, goddesses, beauty, feminine sensuality, and the gifts of being the divine feminine. Modern woo-woo, modern spirituality doesn't even scratch the surface. Because I can guarantee that when I say the word love goddess, I highly, highly, highly doubt the first thing that comes in your mind is a sexually autonomous witch that rides a chariot pulled by two big-ass cats, casually harvesting the souls of fallen soldiers on a battlefield to join her beautiful heaven. But that's what we're talking about when we're exploring the energy of Freyja, the goddess energy that wanted to come through for this week. Now, I've spent the last few days really feeling into her energy, exploring her lore, researching every inch of Norse mythology that applies to the importance of really getting Freyja, of really understanding her archetype, and really what she's here to teach us, really what she wants to tell us as divine feminines. Like many of our other favorite feminine archetypes, she is the goddess of love and beauty, sexual eroticism, but she was also the goddess of death, war, and magic, prophecy. Now, I was particularly excited that Freyja was the goddess to be explored this week because I do, in fact, have Norwegian blood coursing through these veins. I do. And not just in the loose, like, ancestry DNA shit that they do where they're like, I'm 6%. No, my grandfather migrated here from Norway. This Nordic blood is thick, honey. So exploring her stories, exploring her lore, exploring her energy, it kind of feels like telling old family lore. It feels like sharing family gossip with you about a badass cousin. The badass cousin that we all could really use in our lives right now. But before we can get into the juicy details, there are some things that you need to understand about Norse mythology that will make a lot of this story make a lot more sense. All right? Now, my pronunciations, they're not going to be perfect. While I do have Nordic blood, I do not speak Norwegian. Not even a little bit. My brother does, though, so I did ask for a little help with pronunciation, but there's only so much that I can do, okay? Excuse me. Now, in Norse mythology, you've got two main deity families, all right? You've got the Vanir and you've got the Aesir. Now, the Vanir, the family that Freyja belonged to, they usually ruled things of a magical nature. They were, regardless of what each individual god and goddess in the Vanir was in charge of in their own respect, they all had the common thread of being masters of seiðr, which is Norse magic. It's a specific type of shamanism. Now, this Norse shamanism, this seiðr, fascinating as fuck, dude. It is the ability to feel into and understand fate, work with the course of fate to bring about change. It goes deeper. Let me explain even further. It is surrounded a lot with this energy of prophecy, the ability to feel into the wheels of fate, pull a reality or an event or a thing out of that, and weave new events and things into being from being able to channel that essence. Now, Freyja was known as one of the most powerful practitioners of seiðr. Yeah, she was a fucking badass, dude. She was known as the Verva. The Verva. It's a hard word. It's spelled like vulva. It is not pronounced vulva. Now, this Verva is basically a seer, a sorceress in Viking times. Now, in order to really understand seiðr, you need to understand the animalistic nature of Viking times, right? And what these beings like Freyja meant to them as these embodiments of prophecy. Freyja was actually one of the most, if not the most important fertility goddess, feminine goddess of Viking times. Now, often in Viking teachings, the Vorva would travel from village to village performing commissioned acts of magic, of shamanism, of prophecy in exchange for shelter, food, or some other form of predetermined exchange. So among the Vanir, among Norse mythology, Freyja was the embodiment of the seer, the sorceress. She was the master of seiðr, right? But everybody else in the Vanir family also had a connection to and the ability to utilize seiðr. Now the Aesir, the other deity family, this consisted of names that we might be familiar with: Odin, Thor, Loki, Odin's wife Frigg. Now it's my understanding that the Aesir has a little bit more of an aggressive energy. They have a little bit more of a destructive energy, not necessarily in a bad way, but the majority of the beings in this deity family, they ruled things of a very like action-based, war-based nature. We have Odin, who was the god of all. He was the wise leader of all. He was also the god of war. Then we've heard about Thor. The Marvel Universe, they have it kind of correct, but they also have a few things twisted, okay? Now Thor, he was this god of thunder, of storms, of strength. He did carry the Mjolnir, the little fucking hammer thing. And then we've got Loki, who we've also heard of, right? Now in the case of Norse mythology, Loki is actually Odin's brother, but Marvel did get it right with Loki's archetype when it comes to his very trickster energy, never really knowing where his loyalties actually lie. Yeah, that's very accurate. He is messy. He's a little bit of a bitch, actually. But we'll come back to that. And then you've got Frigg, Odin's wife, who, interestingly enough, in a lot of Norse mythology, it's said that Freyja and Frigg might actually be just two sides of the exact same mythological coin, that Frigg is a development of Freyja and her husband, Odin, who is described as absent in a lot of mythology, just like a man. But Frigg, within the Aesir, is also this energy of prophecy, beauty, sensuality, motherhood, this very maternal, fertility-based goddess within the Aesir family. But yeah, there is a lot of speculation. There is a lot of things that go on. Their energies, Frigg and Freyja, might be sister energies. They might be the exact same thing. But when I really feel into the Freyja energy, they feel different to me, Frigg and Freyja. Now, Freyja was not only the goddess of love, beauty, wealth, prosperity, death, but she also had a fondness for all things beauty, all things wealth and prosperity related. She had a fondness for material possessions, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. If you are the embodiment of wealth and prosperity, I feel like it's natural that you would be drawn to the finer things in life. Now, Freyja was known for wearing this gold necklace called the Bræsingamen. This necklace, it wasn't just any old beautiful gold necklace. This necklace had the ability where whoever wore the necklace was able to charm anybody to do anything. This necklace came with the gift of charm and beauty. So not only was she already the embodiment of divine beauty, not only did she already have the ability to feel into fate and change and manipulate fate to serve her desires, she also had a necklace that amplified this energy. Now, she got this necklace in a bit of a questionable way, so we're going to talk about it because I have a few thoughts. Now, it was said that Freyja witnessed 4 dwarves crafting this beautiful necklace. So she offered them everything. She offered them gold, silver, anything that she could think of. But the dwarves would not part for something as simple as silver or gold. The dwarves said, "We will not part with this treasure unless you sleep with us." Needless to say, she is known for wearing the necklace, so she did in fact sleep with them. Now, it's argued that this is a story that is intended to warn you against succumbing to your desires, succumbing too much to being obsessed with possessions. I, however, think it's something different. I think it's a story of sexual autonomy. I think it's a story of a woman, a being, a feminine deity, who knew what she wanted, who knew the power and gift of her sensuality, making the choice to take what she desires. I think it's more of a discussion of power exchange, of refusing shame around desire. And I like that narrative a lot more because I feel like that really is a lot of the lesson of Freyja. I feel like that's a lot of what she asks us to understand about our pleasure. We as feminine beings are often demonized for the power of our sensuality, for the power of our sexual expression. This is not new. This is not new. Slut shaming has been around for millennium, apparently, and Freyja was no different. Because when you really understand the power of feminine sexuality as the spiritual tool that it is, as the spiritual gift that it is, you realize how ridiculous and intentional it is to try to shame women or make them feel like this is a part of themselves that they need to tame. Freyja comes in to say, fuck no, 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 no. This was an incredibly sexually autonomous woman, okay? She was known among the Aesir as a bit of a party girl. It is said that Freyja had many a lover among the dwarves, the giants, the gods. But people love to hate on. People love to hate on a sexually confident woman, do they not? And in Norse mythology, this is no different. Remember when I told you that Loki was a bit of a bitch? Yeah, I think that he had a bit of a bone to pick with Freyja because she probably didn't want to sleep with his trickster ass. Because Loki went around spreading rumors that she slept with everybody in the Aesir family. Now, whether or not she did or didn't, I don't really think that matters, because if you're literally the embodiment of beauty, if you're known as the most beautiful feminine deity to exist, as you fucking should, as you should, as you should claim the power of that sensual energy and use it to your advantage. Use it for your pleasure. Freyja was passionate about her pleasure. She did not play when it came to her pleasure. And this is a being with incomparable wisdom and magical strength. The ability to change and manipulate fate. I wouldn't fuck with her, right? But Loki had a problem. Loki had a problem, and he had a problem with a few things. I think it's because he also knew how she got her necklace. Really, I think he was jealous of the necklace. I know he was, because at one point in the lore, he turned into a fly, flew into her room while she was sleeping, and stole her necklace. Yeah, the hating behavior does not stop. The hating behavior has no boundaries. But don't worry, she got it back. Odin and his guard, Heimdall, they took care of business. But damn, a girl can't just be hot as hell and incredibly passionate about her pleasure and material things without getting a lot of accusations and unnecessary shit thrown into the mess. But when I feel into her essence, when I really feel into the core of her message, I think it really is this expression of the importance of being really confident and solid in your sensual autonomy, in the fact that your body, your pleasure, your desire belongs to you. It is for your exploration. It is for your pleasure. Because there is so much misunderstanding, there is so much underselling on the true spiritual gift of sensuality. That is the creator essence. She's not just the goddess of erotic love, it is fertility. Fertility is deeply connected to sensuality, not just fertility as having a baby, not just fertility in that way, but fertility of ideas, fertility of truth. Because people love to misunderstand a woman, a being that stands in their sensual power. That's why it's so important the confidence is instilled in the truth of why that is necessary, so that when accusations and shit is inevitably thrown around, when that hating ass behavior inevitably tends to follow a confident woman, a confident being, at least you know who the fuck you are. At least you know in your truth, in your sovereignty, that you are in the right, that you are acting in the flow of the universal intention of what that gift, the gift of beauty and sensuality really is. Because your beauty is not a weakness. Your desire is not your downfall. Your power will never require you to make yourself less. Now, Freyja wasn't just an incredibly hot, passionate, magical being. She was not just the goddess of owning the sovereignty of your sensuality and tapping into the essence of prophecy. She also ruled death. She was also a goddess of war. Now, this is really interesting because I had to kind of explore the Nordic tradition as it comes to the afterlife. What is Norse mythology? What is the Norse mythology that surrounds the afterlife? And to me, this is fascinating. In Nordic mythology, they do not go to a traditional heaven or hell. There are different halls or realms where souls go in the afterlife. And where you go is not necessarily determined based on moral judgment. It's based on how you died and your relationship with specific gods. Now, there are a lot of halls and realms where souls go when they die or in the afterlife in Nordic tradition, but the two main ones is Odin's Valhalla, which we may have heard a little bit about, and Freyja in Folkvanger. And this is where being the goddess of death really comes into play. I thought this was so badass, dude, because basically, when soldiers die in battle, Freyja gets the first pick of their souls, Freyja is the first being who gets to explore the souls that have fallen in battle, and she gets to hand pick and choose which souls that she wants to come and live in her beautiful, abundant, gorgeous seiðr, the seat room, as she likes to call it. Now, the souls that Freyja would end up picking were known to be those that died with honor, those that died honorable deaths. Very often, she would choose victorious women. She would choose women soldiers or warriors. In Nordic tradition, it is seen as one of the highest esteems, the highest goals, to be a soul that is picked to live with Freyja. Now, Odin's Valhalla, Odin would get whoever was left. Odin would get the pick of whoever was left after Freyja made her pick, right? And Odin's Hall, Valhalla, was known to be mostly devoted to honorable male soldiers who he would feast and train to fight in Ragnarok, which was like the Nordic apocalypse. Freyja's Folkvanger was said to also be inhabited by a lot of very valiant women, female maidens, even if they weren't soldiers, that she deemed as living a very honorable life or died an honorable death. Now, her ability to like harvest souls and pick them, combined with her mastery of seiðr, it is said in some of the lore that sometimes Freyja would use that ability, I'm not going to say for necessarily darker intention, but she would sometimes save a soul from a particularly torturous existence. And then she would create like a series of tests who was worthy of taking care of this soul. So when we tie back this fertility concept that she's often associated with, it's really interesting because she would save these souls and then create these tests to determine who were actually worthy parents of taking care of that soul. And to be honest, as the child of dysfunctional parents, I kind of wish there really was a test that happened to see who was actually capable of taking care of these very specific souls. You know, I think it's really interesting that we are finding this common thread in these goddesses and deities that we explore, that their core basis, what they are known for the most, is this love, this beauty, this unique connection to their own sensual essence. And at the same time, almost every single one of them has either stories that associate them with death and destruction, or they are the actual rulers of death and destruction. We saw that with Kali. Remember when I told you about Kali? She teaches us to destroy what prevents our liberation, right? Or Inanna, the Mesopotamian goddess of love and sensuality, who took a journey into the underworld to understand the necessity of death and destruction and arose out of that process, a more full and embodied version of who she already was. You know, we've explored Lilith, whose death and destruction isn't necessarily in the literal sense. It doesn't necessarily have to do with the underworld, but I feel like it was the destruction of what was in favor of choosing herself and exploring what was unknown. With her, it's the destruction of who people want you to be in favor of who you know yourself to be, never abandoning yourself and your pleasure. And now Freyja coming in to say, know your pleasure, know your desire, know your power. Do not apologize for any of them. Here we have this beautiful, divine, sorceress being riding in on a chariot pulled by two cats, two big-ass cats. Now we know cats to be sacred symbols of mystery, independence, magic, feminine power, especially in Nordic tradition. In some Norse traditions, brides receive the gift of kittens when they are wed. Cats are the embodiment of, I love ya, but I belong to me. Love ya, but I'ma do me. So we have a beautiful, divine, shamanistic being pulled by the very symbols of divine feminine independence and magic, teaching us in her very presence the importance of owning your pleasure. To be honest, in my opinion, when we look around the world and witness acts of evil, when we witness people just being dum-dums, doing dumb shit, I really think at the core of that is stifled pleasure. I think that when we stifle our desires, we stifle our natural pleasure, it comes out in really weird ways. The necessity of owning your pleasure, it runs deep, hun. Like when we talk about the power of I don't know if I can say this word on YouTube, so I'm going to be a little tricky with it. We talk about schmorgasms, the power of that. Think about what that is, being so filled with the essence and energy of pleasure that there's a necessary release that literally triggers a bunch of chemicals in your body, magic and energy in your body. Have you ever heard of the O method when it comes to manifestation? Look it up, try it out. I think the energies of prophecy, of being connected to magic, is not unrelated to pleasure and being comfortable in that essence. Think about seiðr, this very intentional shamanistic magic that she worked with, this prophetic magic, or prophetic magic in any way, oracle abilities in any way. That when you're working with the ability to sense and intuit fate, possibilities, when you're speaking on other people's lives, that is a powerful ability that cannot be taken lightly. Whether you're practicing seiðr or whether you are practicing tarot or any other form of oracle abilities, doing so for the highest good of all, being connected to that sense of pleasure-based magic, ensures that what you're receiving, the channel of that receiving, is done so as a connection to the creator essence. That your joy, your pleasure, your abundance, they are the core of this sacred power. Speaking of tarot, I did do a little bit of a tarot reading when I wanted to connect with Freyja. I didn't want to just spout a bunch of Nordic mythology at you. I wanted it to be really about connecting to her energy, really feeling into her embodiment, understanding at the core what it is that she wants us to know, what it is that she wants us to embody. And she really came through with this Empress, Queen of Swords, magician energy, desiring above all for us to understand that your magic, your beauty, they are divine tools that require your 10 toes down confidence in them, full sovereignty in the expression of your sensuality, knowing that there are going to be people that misunderstand that. There is nothing that history likes to do more than misunderstand and attempt to control the uncontrollable feminine. Many, many will try, but none will actually succeed when you are rooted in your joy, in your pleasure, in the passion for your pleasure, in not being afraid of the death and rebirth cycles that are necessary in embodying your fullest sacred power. So go and do that, hun. Go and do that. Go and be magical and hot. Me and Freyja say so. I love you.